Let's talk a little bit about what you do here as far as renters' rights go. You said you deal with this quite a bit, renters, landlord issues.
Well, we handle, I mean, about half of our cases involve landlord-tenant law at this point. And we run into issues with conditions frequently. And, you know, this is an area that's complicated because while it's crystal clear that renters have a legal right to a habitable dwelling, as a practical matter, the remedies are somewhat limited. So, you know, piece of advice to start with, if you are a tenant and you have issues with conditions in the apartment, number one, do not simply stop paying the rent. That is a very risky thing to do. Number two, document everything. Make a demand of the landlord, keep a copy, take pictures. You know, you need to really make a record of when it happened and what the problem was. In terms of actual remedies that are available, there are certain things that tenants are entitled to do without going to court, but they're very risky, okay? First, a tenant can do what we call repair and deduct, where you make the repairs yourself and you deduct that cost from the next month's rent. Now, that's limited to 1 month of rent in terms of the amount that you can recoup. It's risky because if you don't pay the rent, you could get an eviction case, and the judge might not agree with you, right? So you got to make sure you do all the notices right and everything. So that's hard. The other thing you could do out of court is to terminate the lease. Again, though, there are some downsides you have to be concerned with here. First of all, if you don't do it just right with all the notices and everything, you might move and still be responsible for the rent, okay? Secondly, as a practical matter, most people don't have someplace else they can go, right? There's a real shortage of affordable housing, so terminating the lease just because you don't like the conditions really is problematic for people. There are remedies that you can do in court as well. You could sue the landlord for damages or assert the habitability issues as a counterclaim in an eviction case. But that can be very difficult for tenants to do without a lawyer. And also, a lot of judges, frankly, don't take the conditions issues that seriously in an eviction setting. So in theory, that's a right that's there, but it doesn't always play out that way. We advise people probably the best thing to do is in larger cities, there's a building inspector, and they can contact the inspector, and the inspector has a legal authority to order the landlord to make certain repairs. You know, there's limited capacity with the inspectors, though, and we get that. I mean, they have a lot of properties that they need to cover. One thing that we're encouraging people to do in different cities is more aggressively use the authority of the building inspector to revoke the rental license of a landlord who has serious condition problems, which would then prevent them from suing in court for an eviction.
Okay.
So that's a lot to get through.
Yeah,
but
it is.
you can imagine trying to navigate that without the insistence of a lawyer.
Well, I was just going to say, if I were a renter, I wouldn't even know where to begin on any of this. So really, is getting a lawyer your best option if you are living in a truly unsafe building?
They should absolutely contact us. I mean, I'll give you we're available to help. We can't help nearly as many people as we'd like to, but we do help an awful lot of people every year, and that's probably the best thing is to call us. But also, you know, make sure that you engage with the problem. Put the notices with the landlord. Reach out to legal aid. You know, if you just ignore it, it's not going to go away.
What about these inspections? I mean, do people have access to the inspection reports? I mean, is there sufficient information out there for renters so they can make an informed decision?
Well, there's some information that's available. The problem really is not the decision, though. This is the thing. People always say, well, why are people living in these conditions? And it's not because they're making a bad choice or an uninformed choice. It's because they don't have any other choice. There's such a shortage of affordable housing, and many of the people that we represent, for example, may have an eviction on their record, or they may have had some interaction with the criminal justice system. A lot of people are not going to rent to those individuals, or if they have a credit problem, right? And so the number of alternatives that people have is very limited, so the information is not the only problem. It's that they have no bargaining power.
So they're already powerless and may end up in a situation where they're even more powerless.
Precisely.
You see this quite a bit?
We do.
Do you think people would be surprised at some of the conditions that folks are having to live in out there?
Oh, I'm sure they would. I mean, we see some truly horrendous conditions. And again, you know, people can say, why are you living in a place like that? Well, they don't have a choice.
That's the unfortunate part of this. Talk about disaster preparedness, and this is something that your group also does. You're ready for situations like we saw in Davenport.
Well, we have a well-established disaster recovery program here at Iowa Legal Aid, which is primarily designed to help with natural disasters like floods or tornadoes. But it so happens that with a tragedy like the collapse in Davenport, people surviving that have a lot of the same kind of legal issues that we can help with, be that you know, putting in a claim for lost personal property or prepaid rent or security deposit. Now, we advise people to put in these claims. Those are very difficult to collect on in the best of times. You know, tenants probably don't have a detailed inventory of all their personal property or a real good way to put a value on it. There's a lot of litigation already, and so collecting as a practical matter could be hard. But you know, if you're in a situation like that, you need to make sure and put in a claim with the landlord and give your new address. We can help tenants with insurance claims. And you know, it's very complicated. You got to do that just right, all the notices and everything. We can help with lost documents, which is a real problem for people. For example, you need proof of income at this point to apply for the state emergency relief. Most people don't carry last month's pay stub in their pocket when they go to the store, right? And so that's a problem. We've had some experience helping with that, you know, but it takes time. We can help with public benefits generally, which is really important because sometimes people have changed circumstances, or just getting more resources like some food assistance when they're displaced can really make a big difference. So, you know, again, I would encourage people to contact us if they've been affected by this.
Okay. You know, what needs to change? And this could be the billion-dollar question, the trillion-dollar question, right? And it could take an hour to explain it. But, you know, in your mind, what needs to change so that people can make informed decisions, so that we can maybe hold landlords a little bit more accountable to have safe buildings?
Well, that's a lot of things we're talking about. Yeah. I mean, I think you definitely could have the inspection regime have a little more teeth to it, so that you know, because frankly, I'm not saying all landlords, but some landlords don't fix up the property because they can get away with it. I think you need to do other things to empower tenants, though. I mean, really, when you're talking about substandard housing conditions, you're talking about poverty. And the problem is that people don't have the means to make choices. And some of that is because we don't have enough quality, affordable housing stock. Some of that is because people simply don't earn enough money. Wages have not been going up. And so if you look at the data about how much people need to spend as a portion of their income, it's not sustainable. It's not sustainable, and so people get pushed into bad circumstances. So there's really a systemic issue here as well. Housing like that doesn't happen when tenants have the power to change it. And some of that is legal, but a lot of that is economic.
Feels like we're treating poverty like it's a crime.
It does.
Does it feel that way to you?
Oh, absolutely.
You're dealing with people
Absolutely. And it's debilitating, it's chronic, and it goes from generation to generation. You know, we work with so many families. And the thing is, this impacts children. Children growing up in poverty have such challenges in terms of getting themselves ready for their life.
Big problem. And this is just one of the symptoms, isn't it?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, so I think you have answered my questions as far as renters go. You know, what would you say to a landlord out there, you know, who has a property like this? Well, you know, if we could do a gut check on them right now.
Well, I think sometimes people assume that Iowa Legal Aid is just going to be completely antagonistic with lawyers. That's not true. Yeah. I mean, I work with landlords all the time. There are very many good actors out there. And we can help. We can engage with the landlord community. I mean, for example, a lot of landlords don't know that if we get involved in a case, we can help the tenants connect with resources, like maybe public benefits or child support, or you know, if there's a debt collection issue or some tax issues. That puts more income with the tenant, which means there's more money to pay the rent. And that doesn't happen without the engagement of people like us. You know, certainly during COVID, we've helped many tenants apply for rent assistance that went to landlords. So I think there's a place for that productive engagement with landlords. And I think really there's a lot of landlords that I know who are really trying to do the right thing. And we need to put in incentives that encourage them, that don't get them sort of create a race to the bottom. So that's what I'd say to landlords.
Okay. You have answered all of my questions. Is there anything else that I'm missing that you'd like to address or that you think people really should know about?
No, I think, well, if there are people in Davenport, they should know that a number of resources have come online in addition to Iowa Legal Aid, different forms of emergency relief. And if they need help with that, they can contact us and we can point them in the right direction. And we have already opened up about 32 cases with people from the building. So, it's touching that community in a way that I think you can imagine.